I'm reading Greene's novel Travels with My Aunt. That was published in 1969. It's about Henry Pulling, who meets his Aunt Augusta after 50 years at his mother's, or what he thinks is his mother's, funeral. And his aunt is a great traveller, and they are travelling together. Today is December the 13th, chapter 9. I had no clear idea what my aunt intended by her elaborate precautions. There was obviously little danger from the douanier, who waved me through with a careless courtesy which I find so lacking in the supercilious young men in England. My aunt had booked rooms in the St. James in Albany, an old-fashioned double hotel, of which one half, the Albany, faces the Rue de Rivoli, and the other, the St. James, the Rue Saint-Honoré. Between the two hotels lies the shared territory of a small garden, and on the garden front of the St. James I noticed a plaque which tells a visitor that here Lafayette signed some treaty or celebrated his return from the American Revolution. I forget which. Our rooms in the Albany looked out onto the Tuileries gardens, and my aunt had taken a whole suite, which seemed rather unnecessary, as we were only spending one night before we caught the Orient Express. When I mentioned this, however, she rebuked me quite sharply. "This is the second time today," she said, "that you have mentioned the subject of economy. You retain the spirit of a bank manager even in retirement. Understand once and for all, I am not interested in economy. I'm over 75, so that it's unlikely I will live longer than another 25 years. My mother is my own, my money is my own, and I do not intend to save it for the sake of an heir. I made many economies in my youth, and they were fairly painless because the young do not particularly care for luxury. They have other interests than spending and can make love satisfactorily on a Coca-Cola, a drink which is nauseating in age. They have little idea of real pleasure. Even their love-making is apt to be hurried and incomplete. Luckily, in middle age, pleasure begins. Pleasure in love, in wine, in food. Only the taste for poetry flags a little, but I would have always gladly lost my taste for the sonnets of Wordsworth. The other Wordsworth, I mean, of course. If I could have bettered my palate for wine. Love-making, too, provides, as a rule, a more prolonged and varied pleasure after 45. Alatino is not a writer for the young. "Perhaps it's not too late for me to begin," I said facetiously, in an effort to close that page of her conversation, which I found a little embarrassing. "You must surrender yourself first to extravagance," my aunt replied. "Poverty is apt to strike suddenly like influenza. It is well to have a few memories of extravagance in store for bad times. In any case, this suite is not wasted. I have to receive some visitors in private, and I don't suppose you would want me to receive them in my bedroom. One of them, by the way, is a bank manager. Did you visit ladies in their bedrooms?" "Of course not. Not in their drawing rooms either. I did all business at the bank." "Perhaps in Southwood you didn't have any very distinguished clients." "You are quite wrong," I said, and told her about the unbearable Rear Admiral and my friend, Sir Alfred Keene. "Or any really confidential business?" "Nothing, certainly, which could not be discussed in my office at the bank." "You were not bugged, I suppose, in the suburbs?" "The man who came to see her was not my idea of a banker at all. He was tall and elegant with black sideburns, and he would have fitted well into a matador's uniform. My aunt asked me to bring her the red suitcase, and I then left them alone. But looking back from the doorway, I saw that the lid was already open and the case seemed to be stacked with £10 notes. I sat down in my bedroom and read a copy of Punch to reassure myself. The sight of all the smuggled money had been a shock, and the suitcase was one of those fibre ones which are as vulnerable as cardboard. It is true that no experienced loader at Heathrow would have expected it to contain a small fortune, but surely it was the height of rashness to trust in a bluff which depended for its success on the experience of a thief. She might easily have tumbled on a novice. My aunt had obviously spent many years abroad, and this had affected her character as well as her morality. I couldn't really judge her as I would an ordinary Englishwoman, and I comforted myself as I read Punch that the English character was unchangeable. True, Punch once passed through a distressing period when even Winston Churchill was a subject of mockery, but the good sense of the proprietors and of the advertisers drew it safely back into the old paths. Even the Admiral had begun to subscribe again, and the editor had quite correctly, in my opinion, been relegated to television, which is, at its best, a vulgar medium. If the £10 notes, I thought, were tied in bundles of 20, there could easily be as much as £3,000 in the suitcase, or even 6, for surely bundles of 40 would not be too thick. Then I remembered the case was a revelation. 12,000 was not an impossible total. I felt a little comforted by that idea. Smuggling on such a large scale seemed more like a business coup than a crime. The telephone rang. It was my aunt. "Which would you advise?" she asked. "Union Carbide, Genesco, Deutsche Texaco, or even General Electric?" "I wouldn't like to advise you at all," I said. "I'm not competent. My clients never went in for American bonds. The dollar premium is too high." "There's no question of a dollar premium in France," Aunt Augusta said with impatience. "Your customers seem to have been singularly unimaginative." The line went dead. Did she expect the Admiral to smuggle notes? I went restlessly out and crossed the little garden, where an American couple from the St. James or the Albany were having tea. One of them was raising a little bag like a drowned animal from his cup at the end of a cord. At that distressing sight I felt very far from England, and it was with a pang that I realized how much I was likely to miss Southwood and the dahlias in the company of Aunt Augusta. I walked up to the Place Vendôme, and then by the Rue d'Arnaud to the Boulevard des Capucines. Outside a bar on the corner, 2 women spoke to me, and suddenly I saw, here bearing down on me, the happy grin of welcome, a man whom I recognized with apprehension. "Mr. Bullen," he explained, "praise to the holiest in the high. Wordsworth, in all his works most wonderful. Who are one of those 2 girls? I was just taking a stroll," I said. "Women lack that they humbug you," Wordsworth said. "They just short-timers. They do jiggy-jig, 1, 2, 3, out you go. If you want a girl, you come along with Wordsworth." "But I don't want a girl, Wordsworth. I'm here with my aunt. I'm taking a little walk, because she has business to transact." "You auntie here?" "Yes. Where you live?" I didn't want to give our address without my aunt's permission. I had a vision of Wordsworth moving in to the next room. Suppose Wordsworth began to smoke marijuana in the St. James in Albany. I was uncertain of French laws on the subject. "We're staying with friends," I said vaguely. "With a man?" Wordsworth asked with instant savagery. It seemed incredible that anyone could be jealous of a woman of 75, but jealous Wordsworth undoubtedly was. And now I saw the banker with sideburns in a different light. "My dear Wordsworth," I said, "you are imagining things." And I allowed myself a white lie. "We are staying with an elderly married couple." I felt it was hardly suitable to discuss my aunt like this at the street corner, and I began to move down the boulevard, but Wordsworth kept pace with me. "You got CTC for Wordsworth?" he asked. "At first, and find you lovely girl, school teacher." "I don't want a girl, Wordsworth," I repeated, but I gave him a 10-franc note to keep him quiet. "Then you have wandering with old Wordsworth." "Ah, no, a first-class joint, right here." I agreed to a drink, and he led the way into the entrance of what seemed to be a theatre, the Comédie de Capucine. A gramophone was howling below as we descended under the theatre. "I'd rather go somewhere more quiet," I said. "You just wait." The A1 racket. It was very hot in the cellar. A number of unaccompanied young women were sitting at the bar, and turning towards the music I saw an almost naked woman passing between the tables, with a number of men wearing shabby mackintoshes like uniforms set before untasted drinks. "Wordsworth," I said crossly, "if this is what you call jig-jig, I don't want it." "No jig-jig here," Wordsworth said. "If you want jig-jig, you take her to hotel." "Take who?" "These girls. You want?" Two of the girls at the bar came and sat down, one on either side of me. I felt imprisoned. Wordsworth, I noticed, had already ordered 4 whiskies, which he obviously couldn't pay for with the 10 francs I had given him. "Zac, chérie," one of the girls said, "present your friend, please. Mr. Pullen, you meet Rita. Lovely girl, school teacher." "Where does she teach?" Wordsworth laughed. I realized I made a fool of myself, and I watched Wordsworth with dismay as he entered what seemed a long business negotiation with the girls. "Wordsworth," I said, "what are you doing?" "They want 200 francs. I say no. I tell them we got British passports. What on earth has that got to do with it? They know British people are very poor, can't afford good dash." He began to talk to them again in a kind of French which I couldn't follow at all, though they seemed to understand him well enough. "What are you talking, Wordsworth?" "French." "I don't understand a word." "Good coast French. This lady, she know Dakar well. Tell her at work in Conakry one time. I tell her at work in Conakry one time. They say 150 francs. You can thank them very much, Wordsworth, but say I am not interested. I have to return to my aunt." One of the women laughed. I suppose she recognized the word aunt, though I couldn't for the life of me see why a rendezvous with an aunt should be funnier than a rendezvous with a cousin, an uncle, or even one's mother. The girl repeated tante, and both laughed. "Tomorrow?" Wordsworth asked. "I'm going with my aunt to Versailles, and in the evening we take the Orient Express to Istanbul." "Istanbul?" Wordsworth exclaimed. "What she do there? Who she go for see?" "I imagine we shall see the Blue Mosque, Santa Sofia, the Golden Horn, the Topkapi Museum." "You be careful, Mr. Pullen." "Please call me by my right name, Pulling." I tried to temper my rebuke with humour. "You would not like it if I continually called you Coleridge." "Coleridge?" "Coleridge was a poet and a friend of Wordsworth." "I never met that man. If he say I did, he humbug you." I said firmly, "Now I really must be off, Wordsworth. Get the bill or I shall leave you to pay." You can drink it yourself, or share it with these ladies. I paid the bill. It seemed an exorbitant one, but I suppose the floor show was thrown in. A naked black girl was dancing with a white feather boa. I wondered what all the men here did for a living. It seemed extraordinary that one could watch such a scene during banking hours. Wordsworth said, "You give 3,000 francs to these ladies for a private show." The price seemed to be going up. "Maybe I'll make them say 200 francs. You left it to me. Okay?" It was no use appealing to Wordsworth's sense of morality. I said, "As you have a British passport, you should know that an Englishman is only allowed to take £15 in currency out of the country. 200 francs would exhaust the whole amount." This was a reason Wordsworth could understand. He looked down at me from his great height with melancholy and commiseration. "Government's all the same no good," he said. "One must make sacrifices. The cost of defence and the social services is very high." "Travellers' cheques," Wordsworth suggested quickly. "They can only be exchanged at a bank, an official exchange, or a registered hotel. In any case, I shall need them in Istanbul." "Your auntie got plenty." "She has only a travel allowance too," I said. I felt the weakness of this last argument, for Wordsworth cannot have lived for very long with my aunt before learning that she resorted to ways and means. I changed the subject by attacking him. "What on earth did you mean, Wordsworth, by sending me away with cannabis in my mother's urn?" His mind was elsewhere, brooding perhaps on the travel allowance. No cannibals, he said, in England. No cannibals in Sierra Leone. "I'm talking about the ashes. Cannibals in Liberia, not Sierra Leone." "I didn't say cannibals. Leopard society in Sierra Leone. They kill people, plenty, but not chop them." "Pot, Wordsworth, pot." I hated the vulgar word, which reminded me of childhood. "You mixed pot with my mother's ashes." At last I had embarrassed him. He drank the whiskey quickly. "You come away," he said. Show you much better damn place. Rue de Douai." I hurried him all the way up the stairs. "You had no business to do such a thing, Wordsworth. The police came and took the urn." "They give it you back?" he asked. "Only the urn. The ashes were inextricably mixed with a pot." "Old Wordsworth meant no harm, man," he said, halting on the pavement. "Those bloody police." I was glad to see there was a taxi rank close by. I was afraid he might try to follow me and discover the whereabouts of Aunt Augusta. "In Menderland," he said, "you bury food with your ma. You bury pot, all the same thing. My mother didn't even smoke cigarettes. With your pa, you buried best Hadget. Why not food with him too? He go hunt food with Hatchet. He kill bush chicken." I got into the taxi and drove away. Looking through the rear window, I could see Wordsworth standing bewildered on the pavement edge, like a man on a riverbank waiting for a ferry. He raised his hand tentatively, as though he were uncertain of my response, whether I had left him in friendship or anger. As the traffic swept between us, I wished then that I had given him a bigger CTC. After all, he meant no harm. Even in his size, he exhibited a clumsy innocence. So that was the end of chapter 9, and I read chapter 10 soon.